Welcome to this public discussion. On the agenda today is food security of communities in the time of war, global and local views. The war, among other things, might cause such a challenge as food crisis, the reduction of arable lands, not everywhere where you seed it, you can and plant it, you can harvest. Some farmers lost their equipment, others could not store or sell their harvests. The buying capacity of people dropped, but these are all interconnected ingredients of food safety, which is part and parcel of the strength of the rare. The Ministry of the Development of Communities and Territories of Ukraine is the organizer. USAID HOVERLA project is logistics supporter, which is one of the mightiest projects that works systematically on local self-government and Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. We have more than 170 local self-governments, communities and regional mass media registered for this event, and all of them, most of them online. So food staff is not under the auspices of the Ministry of Agrarian Policy, but of the regional development. So, but if you are initiating this discussion, well, that means that the Ministry of the Regions expects something out of it. And I give this question to Vyacheslav Negoda, Deputy Minister of the Communities and Territories of Ukraine. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by saying that the focus of what the people, the president, government, parliaments, and local self-governments are doing today is to achieve victory so that peace would come to Ukraine. In order for this to happen, a lot of things might need to happen, including the input from the local self-government authorities. We have observed it already, and it's happening today, that our communities are facing a chain of difficult challenges that we have not expected before it happens. But at the same time, the communities became proactive centers of fight and resistance to the invaders. And until now, they demonstrate not only examples of bravery, but due to the resilience of the communities, due to the commitment, due to the involvement of all stakeholders. Thus, local self-government authorities managed to keep rendering various services to local constituencies and overcome challenges, existing challenges. There was another question, I'm thinking how to best respond to it, like how come it's our ministry that initiated this particular discussion? Well, formally speaking, our ministry is called the Ministry for the Development of Communities and Territories. So anything to do with the communities, anything to do with their development, their resilience, one way or another, falls under our mandate. So I'm grateful that our partners from other ministries and today in particular the Ministry of Agrarian Policy and Food Staff of Ukraine are also involved in the discussion of this topic. Now, speaking about the challenges of our communities that we are overcoming, that we will still have to overcome, well, I would break them down into a number of key groups. The first group is how to ensure the security and safety of people from shellings and missile strikes. So the security of civilians, non-combatants. So that's the top priority. The second thing that we are already doing, but something that will remain quite a challenge for Ukraine looking forward, is energy security of Ukraine. And we're talking here not only about the housing in general, but all of the utilities, water supply, energy, gas, electricity. So that will be a challenge to the communities to keep rendering those services. Another challenge that we are not discussing that much, but it still contributes to our overall victory, because the strength of our armed forces is not only in modern armament systems and weaponry, but also when the rear can provide the military with everything they need. And that's what we usually call food safety of the country at large, of course, but we also have to discuss the food safety of communities. And of course, this is not a brand new challenge for local self-government authorities, because that's one of the vital roles to ensure that there is an efficient network of kindergartens and schools, and supplying them with foodstuff. But today we have a new set of challenges, namely, probably each community now has to have a certain stock or reserves of foodstuff. Like everybody else in the household should have such food cache. So, but it's the task for the local communities, and those communities are predominantly those that also have some farming lands as part of their community. So it's not just a bunch of houses like it was before, but also all the farming arable land around it. So it's extremely important that the territorial communities will think how to support local businesses, how to develop local businesses like food processing industry, how to employ people for such businesses, thus helping them. I hope that our colleague would tell us more about this, our colleague from the Ministry of Agrarian Policy. Of course, there are relevant decisions of the government in this regard, and today's discussion hopefully will kickstart the discussion of those topics, and hopefully as an outcome of such meetings and discussions we would generate some constructive proposals, and through joint efforts we would succeed in mobilizing the efforts and capabilities of local communities in solving this, let's call it a problem. Well, for the time being it's not a problem, but it's a challenge which might evolve into a problem under certain circumstances. So thank you. Hopefully it will be an interesting discussion. Thank you, Deputy Minister. HOVERLA project is being on people's minds recently, especially when you talk about viability of local communities. And what's valuable is that HOVERLA keeps its hand on the pulse of the needs of the communities and tries to react to those needs as fast as possible. Recently, a poll of the communities was conducted together with the ministry, and the project focuses on most of those projects. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to Gabriel Abraham, the manager of this project.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the participants, specifically the two ministries, the Ministry of Community and Territorial Development and Agrarian Policy, for participating in this discussion on food security. To me, this discussion on food security is the very manifestation of decentralization reform. That is to say, the communities represented by the... Speak closer? Okay. Let me start again then. I'd like to thank the Deputy Minister, Deputy Minister Negoda, and as well as the Ministry of Agrarian Policy for participating today on this discussion on food security. I'm very happy, or privileged I should say, as representative of the HOVERLA project to be able to support this discussion. This discussion on food security is a continuation of discussions that we've been having between the mayors and the central government. And this discussion today is also the very manifestation of decentralization reform, so that the Ministry of Communities and Territorial Development continues decentralization reforms even during this time of war is a very positive move forward in decentralization. That is to say, bringing the voice of the people to the central government. Bringing the voice of the people to the central government to affect policies, to affect laws, to affect budgeting, and in this case, to affect decisions regarding food security. This discussion we're having today is a continuation of an initiative we started with the Ministry of Communities and Territorial Development. Previously, we had addressed issues that the communities faced on financial challenges and communal services. Now, as we look forward to the winter and the heating season, food security is paramount to find a solution in a proactive manner. As we're well aware, Ukraine is the supplier of the world. The agricultural industry and the food supply is affecting a globe, and most importantly, it's affecting the population of Ukraine. So to echo some of the sentiments expressed by Deputy Minister Negoda, we need to be looking at food storage, value chain, supply chains, supporting with energy and food security, making sure that the private sector is involved in some of these reforms, assisting with the private sector as they relocate to their new communities. I think the communities are also at the very front of this war. They are the front line of the war. They're the ones that are affected by IDPs and the additional burdens that the community face in terms of feeding their children, their population, the schools as well. HOVERLA is not an agricultural project. HOVERLA is a governance project. But food and food security is integrally tied to governance. And so I'm very privileged and honored to be able to assist with this dialogue between the different institutions to strengthen government policy and laws and budgets that can assist. From HOVERLA's perspective, we will also work on the governance elements to assist with the land management, land reform, as well as continuing to support communities and municipal councils to advocate on their behalf and prioritize their needs. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Now we have a new moderator. Nataliya will be ready with her panel discussion, and I will moderate our first panel discussion, which is on the involvement of the government in food safety in the time of war. Well, it's a formal name. Hopefully it will be a more live discussion. I would like to present two other panel participants: Taras Vysotskyi, First Deputy Minister of Agrarian Policy and Foodstuff of Ukraine, and Oleh Nivyevskyi offline, who represents Kyiv School of Economics. Oleg, can you hear us? No response. No, loud and clear, loud and clear. Great. Okay, Oleg, welcome. Even though you're not here with us, we'll start with Taras, though, and I urge our two panelists to stick to brevity, so it's going to be like a quiz show. So, Taras, on May the 3rd, the government approved the action plan on food safety in the time of war. Obviously, it was developed in April and May. Now, 2 months passed. There are certain force majeures in the time of war. The front lines moved. We had fuel crisis, logistics changed, lots of fires close to the front lines that destroy some of the harvest. We have complaints from private farmers that the situation with them is now such that it's cheaper for them not to do anything with the harvest than to rent equipment, pay for fuel, and harvest the yields. So there is the action plan of the government to ensure the food safety, but it should be amended based on the realities, right? Hello, colleagues, at this discussion. Thank you for invitation. Thank you for the question. On the block of food safety. The situation is this. Actually, what's being passed on May the 3rd was the result of, unfortunately, military experience that we were exposed to since February the 24th. But the government started introducing immediate food safety steps from the first days of the invasion. So the plan is an umbrella plan. So let me explain what it envisages looking forward. Thus, it would not require any changes or amendments. So what did we start with? Early March, we have passed relevant decisions. I mean, the government has passed them, which allowed to procure, using budget funds, foodstuff from domestic producers, from the lists critical important for consumption, and then handing it out to the population. They were procured through local military administrations. The first decision was passed on March the 3rd. And they've been using them for two purposes: handing out to IDPs, internally displaced persons, within the borders of any region, not only those where the combat fighting happened. And the second procurement needs to create stores of supplies, the reserves for critical needs. So initially, of course, we handed out foodstuff with short shelf life, with a focus on cereals, dairy, meat. Well, Taras, clarification. Did you have calculation how much per person in calories? Yeah. Well, actually in kilos it's being one food set which weighs 12 kilos. For how long? 12.5 kilos. Up to 1 month of long-term foodstuff. So, like I said, cereals, oil, sugar, canned food, dairy and meat, gallets and cookies, and something with potatoes. So those sets were handed out to IDPs in all of the oblasts, and the reserves were formed. Then, gradually, while the situation on the front lines changed, like you said, like the occupation finally of some of the territories and even oblasts. So come mid-April, and it resulted in early May decision of the government to start forming the reserves of the foodstuff. So we started calculating what the temporarily occupied territories, what we missed because of the occupation. So as a result, we had to create 7.5 million such food sets. Well, where do you keep those reserves, and who is responsible for them? Oblast military administrations. That's governor's office, basically. So they procure everything. They are the hub where all the food stuff is brought into. Those sets are being packaged there and then sent to communities. So, like, let's take a Sumy region. Then it goes to the communities. Communities pay for this? No. It's paid from the state budget, funded from the state budget, and then distributed. So we continue doing this for IDPs less so, but we continue making reserves. We have to be ready for the occupation of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk, and then hopefully Crimean regions, and then foodstuff rations, those sets, will be then handed out, and their shelf life is 2.5 years, although cereals and canned food. So you have oblast military administration for how long they have to have those reserves available. So, first of all, for the whole population, if we deoccupy the certain oblast, there should be a 1-month reserve of foodstuff for all residents of deoccupied territories. So for the first month, there will be food available for the population of deoccupied territories, but we will be replenishing those reserves. So it's not that we'll just run out of them, no. Another question to our viewers, if you have them, please type them out to us. We'll have Q&A session, and some of the questions have been sent already. And one of them I find interesting. Well, there are lots of them, but one is relevant, from Chernihiv region. Will the martial law impact the infringements on the right of property for your harvest? Will the government retain the right to expropriate, as they called it in the Soviet Union, of other people's harvest? No. We haven't considered even in the first days of war, when the situation was critical. No, never. Instead, the government decided to help from the budget in two forms. First, paying e-support to bank account and to the credit card. And second way, procurement, buying out foodstuff by the government. No expropriation. It's a negative step. It's not needed. And moreover, we are grateful to farmers, agrarians. Some of them, 5, 10, 15, up to 20% of their foodstuff, they share it free of charge as pro bono volunteer assistance to our armed forces and to our IDPs. So farmers started preparing, gathering those foodstuff ration lots or sets from day one and handing them out to the government partially, and some of it has been bought out by the government. No expropriation plans whatsoever. Well, Taras, will you remain having funds in the budget? Because in June the budget deficit was 140 billion hryvnias. So will buying foodstuff into those food reserves for 1 month will remain possible? This is the toughest question indeed, because here we depend fully on international financial assistance. If you look at the priority of urgent payments, so after military and social payments, foodstuff is solid number 3. So it's in top 3 after military and social payments. So from the standpoint of priorities, it's as high as it can go. So, and as to the availability of physical cash, well, we expect on further assistance, because without external financial assistance, we will not persevere. Thank you for being candid with us. I know that Taras will have to join a government's committee meeting soon, but I would like to add that today our main task is not only to discuss the needs like establishing the food reserves at the high level, at the government and oblast level, but we need to discuss what we can do to help the communities. Yeah, that's the second part of our discussion. Yeah, but grasping the opportunity that Taras is here representing the Ministry of Agriculture Policy, will he be able to give advices to our Mr. Negoda? We'll have a second panel dedicated to this. Well, I have my colleague Olena, the head of the line department, who would be present there at this second panel discussion. So, yeah, but I will have to run in 15 minutes' time. Yeah, we will get Mr. Nivyevskyi from the Kyiv School of Economics. So, have you heard what Taras said? Yes, I did. So, Oleg, this central bank, the National Bank of Ukraine, passed a historical decision to set the course 36.6, which is the temperature of the sane and healthy body, human body. But will it be allow the government to ensure this food safety that we raised already before? Well, thank you for this question. I believe that the decision on exchange rate has been relevant for so long, so it's a very timely decision which would at least help the agrarians, the farmers who are exporting their products. This is an export-oriented industry, so all such decisions are in favor for us. Well, let me share some figures with you now, because I represent the School of Economics, and along with Taras, we early into the invasion, we started using a number of analytical tools that allow to gauge the level of food safety in the country, also keep track of the expenditures and losses that the agrarian industry suffered from the beginning of the full-fledged invasion of Russia. So, speaking about the general food safety here in Ukraine, not globally, but domestically, unfortunately, it worsened because of objective reasons. It's comprised of two components: accessibility of foodstuff and the ability of people to buy it, so well-being of people. And our indicator of food accessibility, comprised of those two components from the beginning of invasion, dropped by 40% approximately. So that's the situation of domestic food safety. Well, it's not critical, but that's an objective reality. Nevertheless, we have a certain food basket that we keep in our focus. And if the average salary of the Ukrainians will allow to buy foodstuff for 12 months, now it's only for 7 months. That's how you can illustrate this drop. Second thing, supply of foodstuff, which depends on the health of the agriculture, like farming and processing sector. But our agriculture sector has been ruined 15%. 15% are losses that were incurred by the Russian Federation to the Ukrainian agriculture. And it includes destroyed silos, food storage facilities, tractors, combines, lost opportunity, especially with winter crops. So 15% destroyed already. So speaking about unobtained profits, well, our exporters suffer from the blocked seaports, thus the prices dropped by 30 to 35% compared to pre-war time, even though at the same time global prices almost doubled. So $24 billion or 50% of profits of agrarians of last year is what they failed to receive this year because of war. So the impact of war on agrarians, on the ability to offer foodstuff to the ultimate consumers, is tremendous. And unfortunately, expecting that there will be some overnight improvements, well, forget it. The Russians keep blocking our seaports. And their strategic goal now is loud and clear: destroy Ukraine. And they are not shy of doing this through any means available to them. And some agrarians refuse to plant winter crops are in the state of waiting. Lots of people claim that they will exit the market. So unfavorable forecast, and we need to stay realistic to be able to forecast our future activities. But the ultimate outcome is the food security, not only in Ukraine, but globally. We are not living on an island. We have to keep track of global trends. And as such, that the time on the global markets is of moderate failure of raising enough crops. The annual harvest levels are at historical minimums, and unfortunately our agrarians could not make use of those increased commodities prices. Oleg, sorry, but we have to stick to our agenda. Thank you for sharing those figures with us. Thank you, our panelists. I pass to Nadia Petrunak, who now in panel 2 moves to the level of communities. Yeah, that's our panel 2 of vision of communities, challenges and visions. We have representatives of the associations of communities and the mayors, but first let's watch some video from Odesa region. This is Odesa region, and this community started its growth 8 years ago, becoming one of the active players of decentralization effort. Each year of decentralization for Balta community are dozens of projects, gradual economic growth, and then all of a sudden war, which changed the priorities. Balta community is first of all a huge humanitarian hub located working with the priority goal to help our military, where we united everyone, businesses, utilities, citizens. Food security is also on the mind of people. They're sending tons to the front lines, providing food to territorial defense and IDPs. According to International Migration Organization, IMO, there are about 7 million IDPs in Ukraine. So right now, it's the communities who have to provide foodstuff for them. Yeah, IDPs is the focus for us. There are 2,500 IDPs in our community, of them 900 children. So we have to provide housing for them, and then people predominantly received accommodations free of charge, including, of course, free food and medical assistance. Our community is a farming community, so we today all work on storing up the reserves, because the main job of the REA is stable work and supplying grain, being a backbone of food security. While the military of Ukraine are resisting the aggressors, the avant-garde community helps the armed forces by procuring 7 4x4 cars, 3 buses, excavator, and a truck. Avant-garde community in Odesa region decided to launch the program to help our armed forces. We funded it with 9 million hryvnias, focusing on the support to our territorial defense and the armed forces. The Center for Administrative Services registers IDPs, allowing them to be paid financial assistance. 2,100 IDPs live in our community now, coming from various occupied regions. Twice a week we hand out food stuff, rations, hygiene products, childcare stuff, etc. There is food stuff reserves updated always. For that, there are 2 million appropriated from the community budget to procure long storage shelf food stuff. Yeah, we'll have those reserves available, and if need be, we will be able to provide food both to the residents and to IDPs. There is no deficit of basic foodstuff as a result of decentralization, because now the communities are able to handle complicated challenges. Also, humanitarian and food supplies are being shipped from abroad. But still, the communities need to think about the food safety pillar. As of June the 30th, the platform has been used by 115,000 users of them, including Odesa region. This platform allows to share the information about the available needs in humanitarian supplies and foodstuff. There's ability to contact and sign contracts to supply needed products. As of June the 30th, 2022, 61 needs in Odesa region, 32 proposals. We've seen what's the status in Odesa region communities. Ihor Hrynkiv from Zolochiv community in Lviv region is live with us. Ihor, can you hear us? Yeah, loud and clear. Great. I've had another question ready for you, but since we have already touched this topic, let me ask you whether the communities know about the roadmap to reach full food safety of the community. Well, it's all about the capabilities. When in December 2022, the State Cadastre Committee provided more than 4,000 hectares of land, this land plot is a farming land. But now, in the context of food security, we need to assess all of those land plots, and unfortunately, a lot of those land plots are swamps or salty marshes, and we have only some of the land plots that we identified as such that could be given to small farmers to help large agri holdings to cultivate it. We have provided 630 hectares of land, small land plots from 6 hectares up to 70 hectares to individual farmers so that they can grow cereals there. What's happening? But unfortunately, for the time being, the soil there has too many weeds there from not being using it before. So we are de-weeding it. Now we will be planting some of the crops. Also, we have some of the mills, flour mills. There's no risk of deficits of foodstuff. Thus, we can guarantee to our residents that minimum needs would be met. Our colleagues from Zolochiv community in Kharkiv region, and there is heavy fighting there. There are destroyed houses there. The town of Zolochiv is destroyed. Every time when my colleague, the mayor, Kovalenko, speaks live about their losses, well, our farmers were helping Zolochiv town with 5 supplies, about 120 tons of foodstuff products, long shelf products, both from Europe and from our farmers who already had the available flour and crops to share. What challenges do you have in forming the food reserves? Because you are the community in the rear. We don't know how long the war will go on, but for all that time, the communities like yours will have to help those communities that we will be deoccupying, and the armed forces all the time. So I'll be candid with you. We have no clue for how long and how much it would take. But we recognize that long shelf foodstuff is our focus because winter is coming, and there are about 4,000 IDPs. Some of those people would have no chance of being relocated even after we deoccupy their communities because their houses have been destroyed. So together with NAFCO Corporation, we are building dormitories for those IDPs, and we will obviously keep supplying foodstuff to them. That's what we are doing all this time. So summertime, we can use the budget for school canteens because there are no children in schools now, but later on we'll have to find additional sources to not only meet our targets but also to help Zolochiv and Kharkiv region, our sister town. Viktor Suschyk is with us. From Volyn region, Sushnivka community. Igor, we have 5 minutes with you. And let me remind you that we have simultaneous interpretation, so please formulate your thoughts accurately. So all of the communities are interested. Which administrative and managerial decisions the communities are taking to ensure the food community? Hello, can you hear me? Yes, loud and clear. Well, our community is relatively small in Polisia, with similar soils, similar to that of the previous speaker. After the law was passed on ensuring food safety in the time of war, our community decided to rent 520 hectares of not the best quality land, but still our farmers planted seeds there, and now we'll have additional areas to harvest. How do we ensure the food reserves? Well, whatever's left. The first Deputy Minister of Agrarian Policy told us that based on this government plan, at the national level, it goes all the way down to the communities level. So do you already have such a plan? Drafting. I'll be honest with you. We had to deal with lots of challenges arising with a huge number of IDPs. Our community is close to the border with Belarus. So we've been defending that stretch. Now we are focusing on food now. Well, thank you, Igor. Now Serhiy Mazur, mayor of Balta community from Odesa region. Serhiy, are you there? Yeah. We have seen your video, but I suspect you haven't shared everything. On the video piece, you told us about the need to accumulate foodstuff in the warehouses to accumulate those reserves. How long will you be keeping those reserves in those warehouse facilities? Well, we fully acknowledge and control the situation in our region. we have shared with you some presentation slides, and it will be easier for me to comment on those. Well, pleasure welcoming you all here. Briefly about Balta community. It's on the north of Odesa region. 50 kilometers from us is Transnistria breakaway republic. So, like everywhere in Ukraine, we have no safety from airstrikes. 35,000 residents, 34 communities, like small villages and towns. What's important is that in the first days and weeks we managed to stabilize the panic attitudes, thus allowing our utilities to keep working, mobilize businesses, and mobilize the population. Because when people were panicking, it was tough for us to govern this big territory. Currently, the priority for Balta community is to help our military and paramilitary troops. Paramilitary troops, that's territorial defense, that stands guard of our community from February the 25th. Almost 7 million hryvnias is our donations to support the armed forces of Ukraine. We have cooked tons of meals, canned products, more than 200 tons of drinking water to the military units at the front lines and to IDPs. We made 10 supply trips to the recently occupied territories, so bringing freshly cooked food and drinking water to the recently occupied territories. Well, the communities that are looking at us are interested in managerial experience of Balta community. So which managerial decisions you were passing to ensure food safety of not only your residents but IDPs? Everybody needs to be fed. Well, yeah, 2,500 IDPs, 900 kids among them. So, yeah, we're feeding everyone and providing medical and educational support. So, 55,000 hectares of arable lands, each of them planted. Currently, we are already harvesting. More than 1,000 individual farmers running their individual plots. The focus of the last 5 years was to create those small businesses, and about 50 are large farms. My focus today is to preserve what's being done, but like everyone in Ukraine, we are all replenishing the reserves in the warehouses. For the time being, we have covered 70% of the capacities of the warehouses, but the closure of seaports would create lots of risks and challenges in the future. Also, last year we allocated more than 700 hectares of former kolkhoz lands to create farmers for orchards. We support the presidential program Orchards of Victory. So we planted lots of orchard trees, fruit trees among them, and today we're promoting and advocating for this orchards and greenhouse programs. Also, we have 6 businesses and will launch 3 more on processing of crops, cereals, oil-containing products. We will also strengthen the capabilities of our businesses that produce foodstuff to feed cattle. Also, before war, our focus was on employing people to plant seeds in their own dacha or summer house land plots. As to the long shelf foodstuff product reserves, well, some of those reserves have to be constantly replenished because we keep sending them either to the armed forces or to the IDPs. But additionally to that, we set aside the reserves for to feed the population of those territories that hopefully we will be deoccupying soon. We have lots of volunteers among the local farmers to help feed IDPs. Serhiy, do you need any assistance from the government? Passing any decisions or in paperwork to help you operate? No, it's enough for today. There are weekly government and parliament meetings, so legislature and government officials are reacting to challenges quite fast. Allowing us at the grassroots level to operate efficiently. Thank you, Serhiy. Oleksandr Hrytsaenko from Lubny community, Poltava region. Alexander, can you tell us clearly which decisions the community has passed, managerial decisions, so that others would hear you out and would know how to move forward to ensure the food safety task? Hello? These are quite serious tasks raised at the level of the whole country. Let me not repeat all of the decisions passed in our community because they are very much similar to what colleagues from other regions have already voiced out. Unfortunately, the Agrarian Policy Deputy Minister has left already, but there is his colleague here, and we're grateful to the government and the ministry for being involved. But for the farmers right now, what's important is not only to grow the products, but to sell it at the prices which would allow at least to cover the incurred losses, costs, but hopefully to have enough to get prepared for keep planting and winter crops coming, and the current prices are unsatisfactory for agrarian producers. The government and the producers should be players at the domestic market, allowing the government to procure and buy out the products at the price, at the highest price it could allow itself. What can we do at the local level? Well, of course, passing the food safety products, we will invest into buying some of the seeds that we'll need for planting season. but we will not definitely be able to cover all of our needs. We have 8,000 IDPs, plus 70,000 residents, 62 small villages, plus town of Lubny. We work with the government through oblast military administrations, also with charity foundations and Western partners, and local sources. So these are three major sources that will be used to assist IDPs. Some come, some go, depending on when we liberate our territories. But let's not forget about our own residents. To a large extent, the focus is on IDPs, but let's not forget about some strata of local residents who are quite vulnerable. Households with lots of children, for instance. Our budget will not cover the needs of everyone, and our budget is replenished with the taxes paid by our residents, mostly. Such partners as HOVERLA project, well, we have received about 1 million into our city budget, focus on foods and services, but also exposure to best practices, the ability to participate in the programs. I'm also grateful to the government programs on orchards, berries, and greenhouse developments. But the most important thing is helping our armed forces. We need to recognize that this becomes and remains number 1A priority. It could not be anything else until our victory. So whatever to do with IDP's armed forces and territorial defense, we have thousands, sometimes millions of hryvnias dedicated. It's not one-time assistance. It's constant assistance that is expected from us. Thank you, Alexander. We have Olena Dadas, who represents the Department of Agrarian Development of the Ministry of Agrarian Policy. She can hear your proposals, and hopefully there will be some governmental decisions in response to what they heard. There are also lots of raised hands in Zoom from mayors. Well, wait for Q&A session, please. We want to hear the representatives of the Association of the Local Self-Government Authorities. Ivan Slobodianyk, live with us, the acting chair of the All-Ukrainian Association of Communities. But it's the generic question to everyone. Is there a roadmap for communities to ensure food safety? And the association is your biggest friend. So, please share this experience. Ivan, back to you. Thank you. Very important discussion indeed. It's important not only from the standpoint of food safety, but also because of another aspect, which we have been not naming a spade, survival of communities. Couple of aspects here. The ability to assist with recently deoccupied territories, because most of the infrastructure there is destroyed. So with the help of USAID Agro project, when one communities were helping other communities, well, the idea was to make them partners, to identify the problems that they have, like foodstuff, hygiene products, water purification, fuel tankers, generators, whatever. The second area, IDPs. They need to be fed wherever they were relocated to. But let's talk about the inertia in agricultural sector. Which might affect the local budgets in a year's time. I believe there are a couple of scenarios of what might happen. Even when the invasion started, the agrarians went through the spring seeding season, but then fuel crisis, and then blocked ports, but everybody planted. Now early crops are being harvested. First spring crops would be harvested soon, and then the biggest challenge would be storage. So, two scenarios. First, relatively optimistic, ports deblocked by wintertime, and the second scenario, less optimistic, if it lasts for yet another year. Well, you should recognize that a huge number of farmers were selling the crops from the fields, from the field to the port. So they didn't have storage capacities. And the traders were using line silos. But now they are all overflowing, and it's a challenge to sell it. Delivering to Romania, to Poland, you need to pay additionally $200 or $300, and even railway capacities doesn't. Ivan, what the community should pay attention to? Well, I'm leading to it. Two levels here. National level. And here I agree with Lubny, mayor. We need to focus all of the state reserves, the Agrarian fund, the second component, alternative storage facilities. We have positive signals from the Ministry of Agrarian Policy that Japan has allocated funds for special plastic bags to store it, at least temporarily. The next is to repair some of the storage facilities that could be used as storage facilities. Next, delaying the payment of interest on loans and credits for farmers to the banks. At the community level, all of the tools we've discussed, including from avant-garde community and others, diversification of production. Because under a pessimistic scenario, we need to look for ways for diversification. Greenhouse capacities, orchards, and cooperation, of course. Because currently, there is risk that there will be no planting of winter crops. So there might be a food crisis arising next year, if not this year. And then you'll have to agree that people will use their own summer house orchards to help to meet the needs. Thank you. Stay with us. We'll have some questions during Q&A session. Serhiy Shevel from What's your vision of the roadmap for the communities to meet this food safety task? What we observe here in our association of agglomerated communities is that food safety would present challenges to a large number of agglomerated communities. And probably the biggest challenge would be the ability to sell the products. That's what the farmers raised with the Ministry of Agrarian Policy, asking to help them to sell those agricultural products, to set the prices at the level that would allow to reimburse for the costs and to allow the farmers to plant next year's harvest. Local food safety could be arranged at the basic level so that the residents and IDPs would never face the danger of direct hunger, famine. But let's break it down into two levels. Cooperation, food cooperation, to provide food to school, hospital, household, and employment opportunities. What they do now is they mostly work for warehouses. But at the same time, there is a huge risk for next year because of the inability to sell the products. As a result, cost losses, thus not being able to have costs to launch next season's farming works. You're right, we are currently only thinking about what should be the proper mechanism for us to become the hub of ensuring food safety through sharing our seeds, equipment, experts, farmers, best practices. As soon as the association has those ideas, please publish them, because the communities are waiting for such ideas. We ran out of our time here, unfortunately. I pass the baton to my colleague, Vadim Karpyak. Thank you, Nadia. This is part 3 of this global discussion. Institutional support of communities by international organizations to meet food security. When we talk about international assistance, we talk not only about the food, but also about the fishing rod. Nataliya Hnydyuk is a deputy head of HOVERLA, project manager, Ksenia Sidorkina from USAID Agra project, and Tatiana Libehorska from lead project Surge. Hopefully I pronounced your project correctly. Tatiana, you'll correct me if I was wrong. God forbid. So, Nataliya, let's start with you. Can you hear us? Hear us? We cannot hear you. Unmute yourself. Good afternoon. Sorry for that. Miss Nataliya, I know that you have your presentation ready for us, but hopefully you could tell us how the HOVERLA project helps us to meet the food safety needs? Well, you know, in order for the communities to be able to ask questions, let me skip the presentation and delve right into questions. So your question was about HOVERLA project, but its main goal is to be an institutional capacity building project. So we're helping the communities not only narrowly focused on food safety, but institutionally we help them to be able to carry out all of the functions that they need to carry out when governing the activities. So thus, we focus on two main blocks. The efficient management of land relations, and HOVERLA is 65 communities in 75 districts. We explain to them how to best use farming lands. We all remember quite well that the legislation has changed. They have proposed a simplified procedure to use lands, and that's Law 2145. On the other hand, to work with the communities so that they would use their land to make sure that it becomes the value added. Another important aspect, if we talk about HOVERLA, let's not forget that the simplified legislation for land relations will work only in the time of war. But food security, as it's tied to land relations, so our main task is to prepare land relations units at the local level so that they would correctly use the tools dictated by the market, namely ensure competitive competition for resources through bidding process. Sooner or later we'll come to that. So we come up with guidelines, which we call methodological recommendations, and we work with our communities, helping them to face the challenges after war. Like Vyacheslav Negoda clearly stated, as well as the manager of our project, quite vocally, is that food safety is not only about what we plant and what we harvest. There's also a value-added chain which would impact the development of local economy. And only by promoting the tools of local economy development will be able to ensure food safety, especially the level of our western region. So HOVERLA, understanding that we're talking here about production and storage, well, that means that we need to build new logistical hubs. Space planning, clear location, clear development of community territory. So the second important step, in addition to managing land relations for HOVERLA project, will be to help create spatial or planning documents and paperwork which would allow the farmers to use the new tools for local economic development. That's briefly. Thank you. It's true, we have lots of other questions. Ksenia Sidorkina, USAID Agro. I'll start with the question. A couple of times Ms. Ksenia was asked, what grant programs do we have for this particular subject matter matter? Well, my presentation contains everything that I have and what is being planned looking forward. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me start by saying Your previous question, how the Agra redirected its efforts after the beginning of the invasion. Well, the focus shifted from 8 target oblasts. Now we geographically cover the whole of Ukraine. And secondly, and most importantly, development of processing businesses, foodstuff production, sending critical inputs to end beneficiaries, helping community to community, relocation of businesses. These were the main focuses in the previous 4 months. Next slide, please. I'll show you the coverage with various programs. This is potato seeds coverage. By the way, I'll share those slides later on, so don't you mind if I skip some of the data, especially we received this input from lots of our partners. Horodana UA, that's supply of seeds of various crops for borscht baskets. To ensure food safety within the scope of territorial communities. Providing inputs and seeds to Zernovy, ZOK, from communities to communities, supply of critically important foodstuff. Mr. Slobodianyk has already mentioned it probably. This is the logistics for united communities, providing foodstuff to the communities, especially in the the riskiest or communities, are those that suffer the most. The best that happened to our program is working with local players, local partners. Not a single donor is able to meet all of the needs at the local level. And it's cool, and you have so much hope when you see that people at the local level are ready to help each other and using from community to community. With this approach, we will not only win, but will rebuild 3 times better. This is an emotionally pleasant project, the first relocation of the whole farm with cattle, with the help of the partnership, with the community to community. We found a house for the household, for the family, but also a barn for the cattle. Now we have lots of clients whom we're helping to relocate, having a pool of communities who are able to host them, thus hosting the business that pays taxes and ensures food safety for that locale and the territory of Ukraine at large. Current projects on potato, seeds and cooperative. Well, there is a follow-up here, handing out planting seeds, consultations to households, guidelines to them, not only to plant but also to harvest the yields. So continuity is the keyword here. Here are 2 projects I mentioned briefly. These are not projects as part of the grants competitions, but because they are already projects that were launched. The goal, using different instruments, is one and the same: ensure food safety, logistics, delivery, consultations, legal support of businesses in wartime. Next, please. You have 30 seconds left. Next steps, then. read them up, please. And so now, AGRA program covers the whole of Ukraine, and we find ourselves in the phase of planning a couple of competitions. Miss Nataliya has already mentioned those major areas. Processing of berries, vegetables, fruits, meats and fish, the development of logistical services and services to preserve the current crops, support of farmers, small and middle companies with their upcoming planting campaign, and everything that was traditionally part of Agra campaign, creating joint processing capabilities with the ability to export it abroad later on. Here, more broadly, about some of the programs like on melioration, a couple of pilots, and we have pilots on mega communities, where communities, through joint efforts, identify more ambitiously strategic projects, and then, using their own budgets plus additional sources, will be able to fund some joint, powerful economic projects aimed at food delivery. Please join our Facebook page, where you can find all the relevant and updated information about the ongoing programs with the offer to join them. Thank you, Ksenia, from USAID Agra, Ksenia Sidorkina, where to find more information. Sorry for cutting you short, but timing is important. Tatiana Lebuchorska from lead sector. Also, you are a manager of Orchards of Victory initiative, a beautiful initiative to plant orchard trees in front of the houses, on the squares, and it started back in World War I, then it was continued in World War II, when there was threat of famine, and now it's being relaunched in Ukraine. Have you measured how efficient it might be? Because Ukrainians, if you have a house, you always have a small vegetable patch and orchard there. So thank you for raising this initiative, Orchards of Victory. So the Ukrainians were very willing and joined this initiative, planting at dacha plots, at balconies. Everybody recognizes that the problem of food safety is not only something that the government should resolve or the stand-out community. No, this is the challenge that touches every Ukrainian. This is the Surge initiative, and as part of this Surge initiative, we always involve local experts from the government of Ukraine, trying to react to urgent local needs. Thus, from day 2 of the invasion, we started providing critically important humanitarian assistance. Totally, it's $17 million so far, foodstuff, hygiene products. Later, I will explain why I focus on this. Unfortunately, the war in Ukraine has raised new challenges. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have seen empty shelves in the food stores. Then people recognize that they can eat only what's is indoors, because being outdoors exposes you to, or your life to risk. Then the need to feed millions of IDPs. So despite of those risks, one of the first international assistance projects was this Orchards of Victory initiative, which roots in World War I and II. and proved efficient back then, saving lives. Keeps proving efficiency now as well. The two ministries present today, thank you for supporting this initiative. We inspire people to plant vegetables and orchard trees, to plant the whole range of crops. Food safety is not only cereals, but also, firstly, the availability at the marketplace, the whole range of products that human organism needs, and secondly, the ability of people to get access to those products. So we ask those who can independently grow, do that. We help with everything else, seeds, fertilizers, whatnot, and we strengthen the institutional capabilities of communities. More than half of the Ukrainians are aware of this initiative, and we are grateful that 82% of them have positive attitudes, and they share pictures of what they planted already, sometimes for the first time, and sometimes at the balconies. Today there were lots of questions about managerial decisions that the communities might make, and now let me focus on the institutional support of the communities. Next slide, please. A couple of examples here that I want to use to inspire the communities to implement the decisions on food safety. What the Surge project did as part of the Orchards of Victory initiative is the program of assessing risks. This local program of self-provision of foodstuff. Our website, sadyperemogi.org, goes through those steps. So the first step, risk assessments, especially since those who are located close to the front lines, their challenges would be much different from that in the west regions. Needs assessment is step number 2. Well, a couple of examples from the ground. Chihirin, 8 additional hectares, planted vegetables, cans it, and sends fresh vegetables to the armed forces, to other communities, to IDPs. Another example here, Prishib community in Poltava region. About 5% of the population now are IDPs. They have no shelters. Thus, local residents host IDPs and involve them in planting and harvesting. IDPs thus got employed, and they contribute to more taxes paid into the local budget. The best slide here. Yeah, last slide for you, please. Buty community in Cherkasy region, the only community that hasn't asked foodstuff. Instead, they asked the cooking equipment to help to can dairy products, especially condensed milk, which then they send to the armed forces, to other communities. So they have the new brand, new logo, and the next shipments will have the new logo on them. So scaling up. What a tasty slide to finish. Yeah, lots of calories as well, by the way. That's what people need to feel great. Well, some people felt that it's pig fat actually there, but thank you to explain to us that it's condensed milk. Well, jokes aside, let's stick to the timing. And let's move to the next block. Q&A. Lots of people online in Zoom with us, raise your hands there. You have special function there. Yuri Bova was the first to raise his hand from Trostyanets community. Are you there, Yuri? Yes, I'm very attentive because this is I'm very curious because this will depend how much revenues we'll have into our local budget. So my question is very straightforward. All through the day, through the association and through the ministry, we raised this issue, but no decision just yet. The utilities companies that were established in the communities and that are focused on agrarian topics are deprived of the opportunity to attend any government programs of support. So we have planted lots of seeds using modern seed fund. But unfortunately, you rely here a lot on those who can help you to buy those seeds, the farming equipment, the fertilizers. We are not able to buy all that. And unfortunately, some of the private farmers are just not willing to invest into those unused land plots. But we need to do something with it. And please include communal utilities companies, especially in Sumy region, which is close to the front line. I would like to tell everyone, online and offline, well, it's not that the government is not giving this opportunity to everyone, but we are still working on what could be done in regard of involving those communal utilities companies as well. Or communal property, actually, not utilities, but communal property ownership. The government was thinking at the macro level first to ensure that we save resources to be able to use them later on. And rest assured that we are aware that we need to include communal property companies here as well. I would like to focus our attention on the following. The inertia, even at the level of the central authorities, is such that, unfortunately, for the third straight year, the territorial communities were granted land plots, including arable and farming land. And it's exactly the example when we need to include everyone, every single one, including the communal property companies, to work with land, to process food products. And this decision should be passed like a lightning in a storm. Well, we're ready for that. Our ministry is ready to do it even today. You need to do as cabinet resolution or as the law. Let's do it now. We need to resolve it urgently. Otherwise, we demotivate people. Not only demotivate, but we stop the process of proactive involvement of communities in terms of their small individual farmers. Of course, huge thanks go to our large agri holdings, 20 million tons exported. Great, but we need to involve everybody else. all the way down to individual household businesses and communal property companies. At the conclusion, I would ask you to give me the floor to raise another concern, but I would ask the ministry and all our partners to support what Mr. Pova is saying. If need be, we'll get involved. Together we'll do it, just to make sure that those communal companies are being involved. Last year it was planting pumpkins. You don't know what seeds they bought this year. Not everybody recognizes that territorial communities is not just a bunch of houses. No, it's a huge territory. Yeah, with a town somewhere in the middle, but it's surrounded by fields and... Miss Elena, would you like to add something? I would like to ask Mr. Bova, are you aware of Resolution 738? Offering the ability for those grants. According to that resolution, it says companies based on what they do, not based on their property ownership status. Actually, the way we worded it, regardless of the property arrangements, to get involved. Okay, Miss Andrei, just read this resolution. Hopefully, it will help you. They are telling me that Nadia Kolonchenko from Kirovograd region with us. My question is this. Vyacheslav Andronovich mentioned that communities need to mobilize their resources. Fair enough. But for the mobilized to work efficiently, they need weapons. What I'm driving at. Both us and our colleagues did lots of coverage of canned foodstuff being produced by households, something used to feed IDPs and the armed forces. Well, let's scale up and increase those household capacities up to industrial capacities. Just one plant with a couple of conveyor belts to streamline the production of canned foods. Not that difficult. Each rayon, each district might have it and handle this. Thank you for being interested in this topic. Back to this resolution 738 passed in April this year, which allows for the government to compensate up to 70% in grant funds if you, as a farmer, invest into creating a food processing business. So the Ministry of Agrarian Policy is communicating this. Taras has mentioned this as well. Weekly, we will be talking region by region, communicating to all of the communities in each region about those tools, those grants available. And as it turns out, not everyone is aware about this. Vertically, the Ministry of Agricultural policy, along with the Ministry of the Regions, delivered it to the governor's offices, to the oblast military administrations, and now we need to make one step even further down to the grassroots level, advocate this to the local communities. That's great that the ministry is ready to advocate for this. Vasil Kuybeda, the Ministry of the Minister of Construction, 2008-2010. I am the president of the National Academy for Civil Servants under the President of Ukraine now. So, you made references to April and May government resolutions. At the time when those resolutions were passed, the society believed that the war will be over soon. Now we recognize that it will be long, most likely spilling into next year. So the question is it worth to reconsider the norms for state reserves? Because the peacetime monthly reserves are not enough. Coordination of this effort with local authorities, making sure that the local reserves will not duplicate the national reserves. The indicator of food access dwindled in half. It was mentioned already. We recognize that the closer the community to the front lines, the indicator is lower, access is more difficult, the market mechanisms won't work there. Thus, the question is, what non-market mechanisms of delivery of foodstuff to the population can we offer there? So, 3 questions in one. Coordination of state reserves is being managed by the Ministry of Economics. So, yeah, falls under their mandate. The state plans 6 months in advance before the beginning of a new calendar year, but now we were not able to focus on midterm, let alone long-term plans. We focus on food plan for wartime, focusing on urgent needs to meet the needs of the population of territories under fire with food rations. 3 million of such food rations have been free of charge shared to the population of those territories, again, using funds from the state budget. And what we need to reconsider, and that's what the government is doing, and since the Russian aggression still on, and we receive new challenges day in, day out. The spring sowing campaign happened thanks to grants, loans, and credits. Now we need to think where to store the yielded harvest. And that's where all the ministries are involved. So it's not only one ministry or agency involved. It will be a joint decision by the whole of the government. Those decisions are being made daily, by the way, and officially published. Irina Sitnik, Stepova Zarya newspaper, Dnipropetrovsk region. Hello. Couple of relevant questions. Today we heard some of the takes on it. Dnipropetrovsk is a farming region. Lots of harvesting going on now. But the agrarians cannot sell their products at the price that would at least guarantee that they cover their costs. And I'm talking here especially about individual farmers. How could the government support them? Another question will be how to control the pricing for fuel. We are close to the front lines and we feel shortage of fuel. Private gas stations set high prices, fuel deficit is still on, the agrarians overpay for diesel fuel. Food pricing policy in supermarkets and at the outdoors food marketplaces. Artificial increase of prices. Who can control those prices at the community level? Whether the community can set the ceiling for food prices. And another question is humanitarian assistance. In the towns and cities it was quite all right, but in the villages from February the 24th, our village received humanitarian supplies only twice. 400 food baskets, but we have more than 1,000 residents, so how could people in villages can get humanitarian assistance? So, the ministry, how can you help the farmers to sell the fruits of their labor? Well, let me start with the support to individual farmers. Another question here. They can be registered as self-employed and get grants to start greenhouse business. And that's what they're doing. They can do at their own land plots up to 2 hectares. And if they grow something for their own consumption, well, there are no tools to support them just yet. So all they can expect to get is humanitarian assistance, or in 2 clicks through DIA app you can become a registered self-employed employee and get grants. In order to sell products, you need to have a certain volume and the final end consumer, so cooperation. The Ukrainians historically are not treating this borrowed word cooperation, that was also association of efforts. If a dozen of farmers grew certain crop, well, join efforts, sell it as one shipment. To control prices, the Ministry of Economics monitors the prices for a publicly important category of food products. Irina also asks about humanitarian assistance. Look at the Help Go UA website, which contains the map of humanitarian hubs with contact data. So there are no more questions in Zoom, but there's a question from Ivano-Frankivsk region. Any financial support to individual farmers who breed cattle, especially dairy cattle? Well, currently, in order to get the support from the government, you need to become the operator of that market. Get registered as a self-employed taxpayer. And then this year you will be paid monetary assistance per cow, not calf like 2 or 3 years ago, but per cow. If you have between 1 to 100 cows, and the volume of support will be up to 5,000 hryvnias. This is a grant assistance using technical assistance from international partners who, through the partners or through the budget, would be paid per hectare or per head of cattle, but only to those farmers and households and who received the status of legal taxpayers, legal entities. Thank you, Oleh. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. While we were listening about a cow, a text message came to me from Ivano-Frankivsk region, and he says, well, cows, that's okay, but I have hundreds of sheep. Do you have any support to sheep holders? Elena, can you handle sheep? Not only sheep, but those goats as well. So we had separate government program, and now we can see that there are lots of farmers who are very much interested in running that business and grasping this opportunity. I would like to talk about the seeds. So potentially cattle breeding, you can use extra seeds to feed cattle. This military aggression will not run out of steam that fast. So if you are not able to help out with exporting it, will help the cattle breeding. Well, we have managed to discuss as much as we could. Well, I would ask the representative of the Ministry of Agrarian Policy to tell the bottom line. Have we met the objectives of today's event? Well, this is just a start, and a great start at that. We received yet another confirmation that this topic is very important and very relevant to territorial communities. First and foremost, our focus will be on territorial communities. Of course, we have raised today a lot of countrywide problems and challenges at the macroeconomic level, so to speak. Well, we'll find the opportunity to discuss those some more later on as well. But the focus right now is what could the territorial communities do? How can they contribute? What local programs they can implement? What assistance do they need? Mr. Bover and others kept asking, what managerial decisions should we pass in order to meet the challenges, overcome the obstacles that currently prevent proper growth of private businesses with the support of local communities. I would also like to thank our partners, the HOVERLA projects program, personally to Abraham and to Nataliya Hnydyuk. They also mentioned the importance of this, and this institutional support of local self-government authorities would only be broadened and would result in such changes in the legislation which would allow to support the development and growth of the communities. We'll coordinate this effort, of course, and Agra project, a beautiful project, and I'm aware of it for years now. HOVERLA, Agra, and the third project that was involved today. We need to join efforts around this topic of food safety of communities. I want all of us to think how those chains, supply chains, will get value added attached to them. We need to think not only how to harvest the crop and sell it fast elsewhere to the world and then start importing milk and dairy from that country because of cattle breeding in that other country. Well, even in the form of spaghettis and macaroni imported, why not produce them here? Lots of products that we can produce ourselves and use cereals to meet domestic needs first and foremost, including development of cattle breeding. I'm not an expert on that, even though I'm a village boy and been raising my cattle. But intuition and the logic suggests that we are not using fully the potential we have. The grain country should be fully saturated with food stuff and not rely on the imports that might become critical, especially dairy products, butter, others. Territorial communities need to think about this, together with local businesses, promoting the development of small businesses. Hopefully we'll continue the discussion together with our projects, and this is my public plea to everyone. The next topic might be food safety, but in the context of the support of the development of businesses, farmers, small businesses, so that we'll focus on best practices. Some of them shared here with us today. Hopefully at the decentralization side, as of today, or probably the latest tomorrow, we'll have a separate chapter on the food safety, sharing best practices, all guidelines, normative acts prepared by the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Agri, other ministries and agencies. This would be a strong weapon to strengthen our resilience. 1 p.m. on the dot. So let's say see you soon. Thank you, HOVERLA Project, Ministry of Regions, Kyiv, Crisis Media.